Okay, guys, we're going to talk about dividing mixed numbers. Your first question might be, well, how do you divide mixed numbers? And strangely enough, that is our essential question. How do you divide mixed numbers? Well, I'll tell you that dividing mixed numbers is not very different at all than dividing just regular fractions. Okay, you can use reciprocals to divide your mixed numbers just as you use reciprocals to divide your fractions. So dividing by a fraction is equivalent, or the exact same thing, to multiplying by its reciprocal. You can use this fact to divide mixed numbers. Okay, and that's just saying you can use the same idea that we used with fractions to multiply our mixed numbers. But the first thing you want to do is you want to rewrite your mixed numbers as a fraction that's obviously greater than 1, or an improper fraction. Then you can multiply the first fraction by the reciprocal of the second fraction. And we're going to look at a couple examples of that. So here is our first question. It says 1 serving of Harold's favorite cereal contains 1 2/5 ounces. How many servings are in a 17.5 ounce box? So the first thing you want to do in order to come up with a good problem to work with is try to figure out what exactly we have that's the whole thing, and then what we're dividing it into, how many pieces we're trying to divide it into. So in this particular case, our cereal box is the whole thing, the big thing that we're trying to divide, and then we're trying to divide it into 1 2/5 ounce servings. So the first thing you want to do is to create a division problem. So here we have 17.5, which is where we got this number here, divided by 1 2/5, which came from here. So, and then it says here in this blue word box that we need to find out how many groups of 1 2/5 are in 17.5. So the next thing you do is you rewrite the mixed numbers as fractions greater than 1, or improper fractions. Okay, so 17.5, you may remember how to turn it into a improper fraction is you multiply the denominator times a whole number, add the numerator, and then put that number, that final answer, over 2. So 17 times 2 is 34, plus 1 is 35, and there it is right there. Let me just highlight that real quick, just so we're sure about what I'm talking about. 35, and that's going to go back over the 2. Okay, and then we're going to do the same thing here. We're going to turn this 1 2/5 into an improper fraction. So we say 5 times 1 is 5, plus 2 is 7. The 7 goes there, back over the original 5. So now I have two fractions that are just in the form a over b, and I don't have to fool with the whole numbers. So I have 35 halves divided by 7/5. Now, we need to make sure that we are following the rules for division, because now we're just dividing fractions just like we did before. So now all we have to remember is that in order to divide fractions, we must multiply by the reciprocal. So we have to rewrite the problem as a multiplication problem using the reciprocal of the second fraction. Okay, so 35 halves stays the same. We're going to divide by 7/5. So I'm just rewriting the whole thing down here, and that's going to be the same as 35 halves multiplied. I don't want to divide, I'd rather multiply, but if I'm going to multiply, I have to multiply by the reciprocal of the second fraction. So here I've taken 7/5 and I flipped it to 5/7, and right there it says the reciprocal of 7/5 is 5/7. So now I'm set up. All I have to do is go ahead and start multiplying. So here we go. Multiply. Simplify first using the greatest common factor. I would really like you guys to start doing this. This is going to save you a lot of steps in the long run. I can simplify 35, and I can simplify that with 7, because they share 7 in common. So 35 divided by 7 is 5. 7 divided by 7 is 1. I can't simplify here, so I'm just going to multiply straight across. 5 times 5, that's what I have here. 5 times 5 is 25. And then 2 times 1 is 2. So it's the answer's in an improper fraction format, so we have to turn it into a mixed number. So in order to go from a improper fraction to a mixed number, we divide the top number by the bottom number. 2 will go into 25 12 times. 2 times 12 is 24, so I subtract 24 from 25 and I get a remainder of 1. So I take that 1 and it goes in my numerator over my existing denominator. So 25 twelfths is the same thing as 12 and 1/2. So there are 12 and a half servings, and remember our serving size was 1 2/5 ounces of cereal in the box. Let's look at another example here real quick. We can solve problems involving area the same exact way. And just as a reminder, in order to find area of a rectangle, you need to multiply the length times the width. You need to remember that. If you know the area and only one of the dimensions, you can divide that area by the known dimension to find the other dimension. And you'll get it here in a second when I start talking about it. But here I have the area of a rectangle sandbox is 56 2/3 square feet. The length of the sandbox is 8.5 feet. What is the width? So I didn't want to do that. Let's just get the pointer tool and pull this first thing away here. So the first thing I want to do is write my situation as a division problem. So I'm going to go back to my pen and pull out my important stuff. And so I got the total area of the sandbox here at 56 2/3. So that's where I am here. 56 2/3 is what I'm going to divide up. Okay? And I'm trying to find the length. Let me just kind of draw this over here. I got a sandbox. It's not perfect, but the whole area is 56 and what? 2/3. 2/3. And then I have one of the lengths is 8.5 feet. And I want to figure out the other length. And you remember that if I multiply the 8.5 times this length here, I get this. So it just goes without saying that I can divide this number by one of the side lengths and that'll give me the other side length. Okay? So follow me here. I got it set up. Next thing I need to do is to rewrite it as improper fractions. So I take 56 2/3 and I multiply 3 times 56 and I add 2 and I come up with 170 and it goes back over the 3. I take an 8.5, I multiply the 2 times the 8, I add 1, I get 17 over the 2. So there is my rewritten fraction and it's ready to be divided. Okay, now remember what I want to do with dividing fractions is I'd rather multiply. I don't want to divide. I'd rather multiply. So I rewrite the problem as a multiplication problem using the reciprocal of the second fraction. So 170 over 3 stays the same. I don't want to divide, so I want to multiply. And I multiply by the reciprocal of 17/2, which is 2/17. Remember, we just flipped it. Numerator on top, denominator on the top, numerator on the bottom. Now I can go ahead and multiply. So the first thing I want to do though is actually simplify. So I'm going to try to simplify 170 and 17, which I know I can divide by 17. So 170 divided by 17 is 10, and then 17 divided by 17 is 1. So now I can multiply 10 times 2 and get 20, 3 times 1 and get 3. It's an improper fraction, so I need to simplify it and turn it into a mixed number. So I divide 20 by 3. 20 will go in there. Well, if I did it 7 times, 7 times 3 is 21, so that's too big. It has to be 6. And then I'll have a remainder of 2, and then that 2 goes in the numerator over the original denominator. So the width of the sandbox is 6 2/3 feet. So I now know the width, 6 2/3 feet. So if I multiply 8.5 times 6 2/3, I'm going to get 56 2/3.